Hi there, folks. Welcome to another episode of the A Minute to Midnight show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand. And with me today, I have Leo Hohmann, who I'm sure needs no introduction for anyone that follows this channel and numerous other ones. Regular guest, and it's always fascinating to talk to you, Leo. So welcome back.
Yes, good to be with you, Tony.
Same. Now, do you think we've got anything we can talk about today? Not much going on, right?
Yeah, right. Not much going on. We're just at the brink of World War III. We've got Joe Biden threatening to call a climate emergency. We've got the U.S. elections coming up. We've got people talking about another pandemic of bird flu with disease X, and a Japanese scientist warning us about a new vaccine being a new mRNA vaccine coming out of his country, Japan. Yeah, there's just a few things to talk about.
And then you've got protests going on as well,
Yes.
all over the place. So, yep,
I saw that in Ireland today.
Oh, really? Ireland?
Yeah, anti-immigrant protests going on in Dublin, Ireland today.
Oh, I didn't know about that one. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's certainly a lot happening then. Right. So where do we start?
I haven't written about the Dublin protests, but all I would say about that is I did read an article about it in the Irish Times, and it was written kind of like you would expect a story about the J6 protests to be written by the New York Times. I mean, they said that there were, quote, hundreds of pro-Ireland racists out in the streets, hundreds. The videos that I saw on Twitter or X, you could clearly see that it was tens of thousands. Okay. And the Irish Times even admitted in their article that it took 45 minutes for the parade of people to get through one of the biggest main intersections of Dublin. And it was holding up traffic for 45 minutes as they proceeded through this intersection. Now, if it were just 200 or 300, 400 people, do you think it would take 45 minutes to get through an intersection?
No.
I mean, the biased reporting of the Western media is just incredible to me.
It's the same here in New Zealand. It's very biased as well. Yep, for sure. Okay, and what about the Russia and Ukraine situation?
Yeah,
a
lot of developments on that front over the weekend and today, Monday. Over the last few days, we've seen more Western puppet globalist leaders come out and say that we need to send Western troops into Ukraine if Ukraine fails to hold the line against Russia. So if Russia breaks through the line and succeeds in its war with Ukraine, we should not just, get a negotiated settlement and end that war. No, we need to send Western troops. This came from Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority Democrat leader of the House, and I hesitate to even call him minority leader of the U.S. House of Representatives because the Republicans only have like a 1 or 2 vote majority, and so Jeffries is almost every bit as powerful as the Speaker of the House right now because he is because of the slim margin that Mike Johnson, the Speaker, the Republican Speaker, has to work with. And so this man's very powerful. He is coming out on CBS Sunday morning telecast or TV show yesterday saying that we need to that the U.S. will, quote, likely have to send troops to Ukraine if Russia is successful in that war. And so not just money, but troops on the ground. And then Putin and his Putin and the foreign ministry spokesperson in Russia, both came out with statements saying that if this happens, it's going to be lights out in London and some of these other Western capitals. They will basically be vaporized in minutes. And they also called for a tactical nuclear weapons drill to be held in Russia on the Ukrainian border in preparation for any Western troops that may show their faces in Ukraine. Putin is now sending a signal that he is not bluffing. There's this lieutenant colonel retired named Earl Rasmussen who put out a video yesterday saying this guy Putin is not bluffing, and by him organizing this tactical nuclear drill, that is sending a very clear statement to the West. You had better reevaluate these plans to send your troops into Ukraine, because I am going to use these tactical nuclear weapons on them. And he also talked about potentially taking the fight directly to the source, because David Cameron, the foreign secretary of the UK, former prime minister, came out a couple days ago and said that the Ukraine should use its UK-provided long-range missiles to fire deep inside of Russian territory. Now, this goes totally against all former directives that have been given to the Ukrainians about the use of these long-range missiles. Any long-range missiles that could reach Russia were given to them with strict orders by the US and the UK to only use them inside Ukrainian territory, on Russian-held territory inside Ukraine. They were not to be used on Russia proper. So this is a big, huge turn of events where David Cameron, is now coming out and saying that you, Mr. Zelensky, president of Ukraine, have our permission to use these weapons to, potentially hit Moscow and some other major population centers inside Russia. Can you imagine if Ukraine does that? Putin has said if that happens, he will consider the UK to now be a direct combatant in this war, and they will be treated as a direct combatant. And you know what that means. He will launch missiles against UK targets inside the UK. And so this is where we're heading, I think, Tony. I don't know how far out this rhetoric is ahead of actual events on the ground. But usually when they start talking like this, the pattern that we've seen during this war is it doesn't even take very long once they start changing their rhetoric to actually make good on the rhetoric and do what they say. So, we could wake up tomorrow to learn that the Ukrainians have fired missiles, long-range ballistic cruise missiles, whatever, on Moscow, and that maybe the next day or two later we wake up and find out that London has been hit with nuclear weapons. I mean, this is where it's going. Unless something pulls back from the brink, we are on an escalatory ladder toward catastrophic military exchanges.
And there was that on Russian state television a week or two back talking about this, even before this latest announcement, saying that basically the UK would be underwater and that,
yes,
and so on and so forth. And then finishing with, this is not propaganda.
Exactly. In other words, I'm not calling your bluff. You better take me serious, because so far they haven't been. The behavior of the Western government officials in this war has just been appalling. Every time Putin says something, they simply ignore it and then cross that red line. Blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Some say that the CIA or some CIA-connected units were involved in that attack on Moscow, where they killed, 200 and some people. This is very scary, just the recklessness with which we see the Western leaders acting, treating Russia almost like they're not a world power. They're not in possession of the world's largest stockpile of nuclear weapons. Regardless of what you think of Putin, I don't care if you hate him, think he's a dictator, think he's going to take over the world, which is all nonsense in my opinion, but you're entitled to that opinion. But one thing you're not entitled to do, if you are calling yourself a Western government leader, is to recklessly pursue this war and poke this Russian leader in the eye and expect never to be hit back. I mean, what is going through their minds, would you think? I mean, it's just really unbelievable to me.
And the fact is, there's nobody getting around the table and trying to negotiate a settlement to this. Nobody. No. You don't. When was the last time you even heard that even being mentioned, that possibility? Meanwhile, at least 500 Ukrainians are dying every day, in my understanding. That's a lot of people.
500 to 800 a day.
That's a lot of people. Are they all just expendable? You know, this is the reality. For what? A war expendable population to achieve what?
I guess it's just to feed the military-industrial complex and to get rid of Putin. They want to deal a black eye to Putin and see him removed from office. They keep hoping that the Russians will rise up and, due to the unpopularity of this war, overthrow Putin. That's not going to happen. He has 75 to 80% backing of the Russian people now in this war. They are not messing around. And they're not going to back down to the West when they feel like there's an existential threat to their existence, like any nation would. If the Russians spent 10 years training and building up a military force in Mexico and forming a military alliance with Mexico, inviting them into like we are inviting NATO into, inviting Ukraine into NATO. Think if Russia was doing this with Mexico and building up a troop presence there and training the troops and then sending missiles and then sending F-16 type fighters and then threatening to send their own troops. Do you think the United States would just sit back and say, no big deal. He'll get over his fantasies of taking over Mexico? No. We would be dealing with that in a very serious manner. And I guarantee you we would not wait as long as Putin did to send our troops into Mexico and shut that type of an operation down. Then throw in the caveat of, say, the troops there that Russia was training and in Mexico were shelling cities in Texas, because that's what was happening over the years between 2014 and 2022 when Russia finally sent in troops. The Russian-speaking citizens of those eastern provinces of Ukraine were being shelled by Kiev and the Western-backed puppet government there. No government, no country, no superpower for sure is going to put up with such shenanigans. So nobody seems to know the history. And then if they do know the history, they're not saying, well, what if the shoe was on the other foot and Russia was behaving this way in our backyard in Mexico? That seems to me the obvious question that nobody is asking, but they should be asking. And that should be the question that all of our members of Congress, the White House, and everybody should have to answer and put an end to this hypocrisy where the United States government says, do as we say, not as we do.
Yeah, and we've been told that, Western propaganda that Putin's trying to reestablish the Soviet Union, or look at what Adolf Hitler did in the war, taking one little bit.
But where is there evidence for that?
No.
And Putin has been in office for 24 years. Do you really think he wouldn't have tried it already if that was his goal, if that was his mission? How long did Adolf Hitler wait from the time he took power to the time he started invading neighboring countries, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and all these countries. I don't think it was more than 2 or 3 years
Yeah, it
at the
wasn't long.
most.
Yeah, maybe
No,
3 years. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So these people are insane. They know they're lying, but they have an agenda. And the agenda, I think, is to strip Russia of any strong leadership and to take control of the vast resources in that country. They have got, and not just in Russia, but countries in Africa that Russia is increasingly having influence over. Like, have you seen what took place in Niger over the weekend? Or I think it was Friday.
Yeah, well, they kicked the Russians basically kicked the US out of a base, right?
Yeah, because the new military government in Niger didn't want the Americans in that base, and they invited the Russians in. This is a $110 million base. I understand it was built with U.S. tax dollars, and it had been populated by French troops until last fall, around October of last year, when the military government of Niger kicked the French out. Well, the U.S. just took their place without any invitation. They said, okay. And the reason, they have uranium, I think it's uranium, some rare earth mineral in Niger. That is the reason why we were there, why the French were there. It is a critical resource that the West wants to have control of. And now the Russians are moving in, and they will get control of it. So this whole thing is really a battle over economics and natural resources. And the United States does not want Russia having access to these resources, even the ones in their own country. Russia is very rich in natural gas and gold and all sorts of rare earth minerals. So, yeah, the West is making a play for Russia. It really is astonishing to sit back and watch what's going on. The West, I just don't. Tell me your thoughts, but I don't see it performing very well if it does go to a hot war with Russia. Now, no country is really going to come out of that a winner, I don't think.
No,
but certainly not the United States and the UK, who are the ringleaders of this whole Western anti-Russian obsession.
If it became a direct conflict, then you've got to also remember that there's people like China and Iran and other people that are likely to also jump in, and so it wouldn't probably just be
China jumps in on the side of Russia. In fact, I was mentioning it to somebody today that the only caveat that I can think of that would explain the bizarre actions of Western leaders over the last 2 years would be if they had a secret alliance with China, a secret deal with China, to where China would pretend to be on Russia's side, but then when the chips really came down, in the end, they would flip over and say, oh, no, we're actually on the Western side. If that's the case, that would actually explain some of this bizarre Western rhetoric and sending all these advanced weapons in, knowing that it's going to bring this very big response from Russia at some point. Do they have a secret deal with China? I would like to know that. It would not be unprecedented, I will say, because if you look at the history of the UK, Britain, during the run-up to World War I, they took years, about 6-7 years, to build up their military and negotiate these secret military alliances with countries like Belgium and France and even Japan, with the intent of provoking a war with Germany and destroying Germany, and they would make it look like Germany was the aggressor, which is exactly what they're doing with Putin now. There's a book, I don't have it here at my desk, called Hidden History, The Secret History of World War I or something like that. It is fascinating history that we are not taught in our schools in the West about the run-up to World War I and how it was all really fomented by years of planning by a secret cabal in the UK led by Lord Alfred Milner, and Lord Rothschild, Nathaniel Rothschild, and several others. Cecil Rhodes was actually one of the initial members of it, but he died before it got close to World War I. But yeah, fascinating history, and I'm seeing it replay itself now in this conjured up provocation of war with Russia. Just, take out Germany and plug in Russia, and you can see this exact same type of strategies being used. So I would not be surprised. I don't anticipate it, but it wouldn't shock me if we found out at some point that China really isn't on Russia's side.
The thing is, I wouldn't trust China anyway.
No.
No. Either way, whether there's an agreement or not, China is going to look after their own best interests as well. And as far as Russia goes, a couple of Russians that I know, I haven't seen for probably a year and a half. Initially,
they're probably keeping a low profile.
Yeah, well, that I moved into a different area, so but they were here in New Zealand. Russians are very nationalistic people. I mean, they came to New Zealand to basically they didn't like Putin, but when the chips are down, they're Russians and they'll always support their country, whether they necessarily agree with Putin. And they didn't originally. They didn't agree at all with the war that Putin even went into the Ukraine. But then, having seen some of the stuff, they started to wonder whether it was justifiable and all that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that whether they like Putin or not, when it comes to it, if Russia is attacked, Russians are going to all unite. That's just the way it'll be, because they're fiercely nationalistic.
Yes, and this idiocy coming out of the West that Russia wants to not only restore the old Soviet Union, but I'm telling you, some of them say they want to go all the way to Paris and Berlin and take that too. It's unbelievable, the rhetoric we're hearing.
Yeah,
as if that were even possible. I mean, the Soviet Union could not even occupy and manage the Eastern European satellite countries for very long. And yet we're supposed to believe that they would have the resources and the ability to occupy France and Belgium and Spain and all of Western Europe. I'm telling you, the fear-mongering that I have seen in the Western media lately about Russia is just pure idiocy. I mean, Russia is not that big of a country population-wise. I mean, they've got about half the population of the United States. Where are they going to get the manpower to occupy all these countries, invade and occupy them? Invade, hold, and occupy. Insane. They do not have the ability to do that. What they do have the ability to do is completely annihilate Western cities if we provoke them one step too many. And that seems to be what these Western puppet globalist politicians are trying to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy situation, that's for sure. I hope it doesn't come to nuclear war, but gosh, at this point, all bets are off, really, which way it could go, because unless something radically changes, there's no other way out of this at the moment, because Russia's not going to just give up. No way. No. And it seems that the West is absolutely determined that they have to, Ukraine has to win a war that they can't win. So what's the answer? And like I said before, no negotiating.
Even some of my favorite military analysts don't seem to totally get it, like Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Have you seen some of his analyses of the Ukraine-Russia situation?
No. Sorry.
He's a retired U.S. colonel who was a Trump, I believe, a military advisor to President Trump, and he's a very bright guy. I mean, he knows history. He's a brilliant military mind. But when I listen to him being interviewed in his many YouTube interviews that you can find, he seems to always think that, Ukraine is going to collapse. They've lost 600,000 men already to date, and the collapse is just maybe 2 or 3 weeks away. He's been saying this for about a year now. The collapse never comes, of course, but even if it does, and I think we are getting close now to that point where they just simply are running out of warm bodies to throw into the meat grinder. And so they are going to, their military is going to collapse. But what he still, I'm not sure, understands is the West is not going to give this up. Even if the Ukrainian military and government did collapse and the Russians marched all the way to Kiev, what would happen? I don't believe the West is going to, say, okay, let's do a negotiated settlement now. And, you can have that one half of Ukraine, and as long as you back out of Kiev and the western parts, you can have those eastern 3 provinces, the Donbass and those areas. No, that's not going to happen. That would be if we had a rational a group of people in charge of our governments. But there are no rational people left in Washington anymore, and or in London, or in Paris, or in Berlin. Not with any amount of power or authority to start any negotiations. And so what they are going to do, Macron has been the most aggressive one talking about this, is bring in Western troops. Macron has already talked like 3 or 4 times about bringing French troops into Ukraine. And they just aren't taking Putin seriously. I don't understand it. Do they have a death wish? Are they suicidal? Do they think they can ride out a nuclear war? I mean, I do hear that they're building elaborate bunkers, some of these elites, fortified bunkers in Slovakia, in Hawaii, and off the coast of Florida. And so who knows what's in their minds, Tony?
Well, just to kind of move slightly off, when you're talking about do they have a death wish, a suicide wish, well, what about the leading into the US, for example, of so many foreigners, like across the southern border, and then they're talking about wanting to bring in Hamas, largely supporting refugees from Gaza, who know where their allegiance is going to lie in any sort of a situation with a war. So has the US basically, imploding from within anyway?
Yeah, I think that's part of what's going on. The U.S. sees its empire imploding both at home and abroad. We've already talked about the embarrassing situation in Niger over the weekend, where they're losing that base, it appears. And the BRICS nations seem to be economically offering alternatives to countries alternatives to the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The U.S. debt is crossed 34 trillion now. There's no way you can ever pay that back. The only reason we've been allowed to continue as functioning with that kind of debt is because of our superpower status, our military, and this dollar being the world's reserve currency. So the dollar has basically been backed not by gold, but by oil. Whenever oil is transacted around the world, countries paid for it in dollars. It didn't matter if, Iraq was selling it to, India or vice versa. They would settle up in dollars. And so this was very beneficial to the United States economy. And then these countries, in kind, the wealthier countries would invest in U.S. Treasury dollars to finance our debt. Saudi Arabia, China, Japan, these countries all hold a good chunk of U.S. Treasury debt. And so they don't want to continue doing that anymore because they see that this paper tiger is is losing its cachet, so to speak, in the global economy, and BRICS is rising. And then you've got this situation at home with the border that you mentioned. I saw a chilling interview the other day on Redacted with Clayton Morris. He's a former Fox News guy. and he has a really good channel on YouTube called Redacted. He was interviewing this retired Homeland Security guy. I don't remember his name, but the guy was saying he estimated that we have 45 to 50 million illegals in the United States now. 45 to 50 million. He said that a country cannot sustain even 1% of its population being illegal for long. That's an existential threat for any country if they have more than 1% of their population being illegal aliens. Well, guess what? 45 to 50 million, you're talking, that would add up to 13% of America being illegal aliens. And he said that even if his estimates are a little high and it's only 6 to 7%, basically half that, we are cooked. We are done for. It's just a matter of time before it all implodes, because there's no way any country can survive 6 to 7% or more of its population being illegal aliens. The financial burden alone will just collapse the country at some point.
So even if people are not illegal aliens, the fact is now there's just so many people in the US that would not have traditionally been Americans or whatever, with ties to who knows what and who knows where. But I just saw this morning, one group I was associated with a student protest calling for a day of rage in New York. Well, I mean, a day of rage, what does that sound like? That's, that's crazy. That could even not be stamped down on.
Well, you saw one of the Ayatollahs in Iran came out a couple days ago, I think it was on Friday, and said, so you see those protests going on in U.S. college campuses? Yeah. Those are our people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure he's exaggerating, but a lot of them are just, stupid communists. But a lot of them are also have ties to Islamic countries like that. So, the states of Michigan, for instance, and Michigan and Illinois have tons of Palestinians and tons of Shia Muslims loyal to foreign Islamic regimes. There's just no way around that. That's a fact. You go there, go visit Dearborn, Michigan, go visit Hamtramck, Michigan, go to Warren, Michigan. I'm from that area. I've driven through there, all of the nooks and crannies. I've seen all the mosques. I've seen the women walking around in full burqas, covering their entire bodies. You're going to tell me these people are loyal to the United States of America? All the signs are in Arabic or Persian or whatever? No. But this is what we've invited into this country. I've written a whole book on this for your audience that might not know. It's called Stealth Invasion. And you can get it at Barnes & Noble. It's been banned by Amazon. I wonder why. Because it's all playing out in real time. I wrote the book in 2017, and now it's all playing out in real time.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and it's similar things are playing out all across Europe as well. So,
yes.
It's hard to see any positive things going on, but I suppose we should look to finish up with something sort of positive in terms of, as Christians, we've still got to live in this world, even though it's falling apart. And I notice, and other people saying the same thing, they're noticing just more anger and more unreasonableness in people, in the general population, selfishness to a level that wasn't, in our experience early on. I'm hearing this from Americans. I'm hearing it from people in New Zealand. And so as Christians, we've still got to be here in this world. So
yes, and I would say this. Take heed to the words of Jesus Christ. I believe it was Matthew 24, where he warned us that in the end times, we will encounter such violence and corruption that it will be shocking, and the love of many will wax cold. Don't let that happen to yourself. it's easy to fall victim to that already, even if we're not in the end of the end. When what he was talking about, it sure looks similar to what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So don't let that happen to your heart, your soul. Continue to. I don't say be stupid and trust every Tom, Dick, and Harry that might be trying to scam you. But when you see a person who you know is in real need, whether it's your neighbor or a family member or what, maybe they haven't always been so nice to you, but I think as Christians, we're not to allow our love to grow cold.
Yeah, and Jesus also said, when he was asked, if your brother offends you, should I forgive him 7 times? And Jesus said, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And, there's going to be times where people are not going to respond nicely, even when you try and be nice and kind and reasonable back. And so we may have to turn the other cheek multiple times to those people and pray for them, of course, because some of them will get saved. And unfortunately, a lot of professing Christians are not doing a heck of a lot better at this. But each one of us stands and falls ourself before our Master, which hopefully for most of our listeners who've accepted Jesus Christ, he is who our Master is. So ultimately, we are not standing and falling in front of other people. It's God who sees our heart and sees our actions. And when it comes to the final day, we're not going to hide behind what other people said or did or anything else. We're going to be accountable for how we responded.
Exactly. Well said, Tony.
Oh,
well said.
Well, Leo, I guess we should look to wrap up. So our listeners that don't know where to find you, where can they find you online?
Yeah, they can find me at leohohmann.com. That's Leo Hohmann, spelled Hohmann. They can get my book at barnesandnoble.com, Stealth Invasion. They can also find me. I have a Substack account, leohohmann.substack.com, and you can sign up for free to get alerts from my Substack. So, those are the main ways that you can follow my work.
Awesome. And you're pretty prolific at putting out various articles, and they're always worth reading. I'm always grateful to get them. So if people haven't found you already, they should look you up for sure at those places. So thank you again for being on the Minute to Midnight show, Leo.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Tony.
Cheers, and have a great day.
Cheers.
And folks, don't forget our website is aminutetomidnight.com. Please make sure you subscribe to us at A Minute to Midnight. And also, we do run A Minute to Midnight 100% by donations. It's greatly appreciated, the folks that do help us through donating. And if you want to, you can help us by donating at aminutetomidnight.com. The music used I've written, played and recorded as well. Well, God bless, and God willing, we'll be back with another episode in a few days' time.